Hey guys, Hamster Will here with a new video, and today I'll be going over my thoughts and experiences of the newly released raid Blackwing Lair. Well, new. It's already been out for a little while, and as we've witnessed, this raid was cleared by several guilds on the same night within record time. Now, my guild managed to clear Blackwing Lair in 2 raid nights, which seemed like an eternity compared to some other guilds, but then again, it didn't surprise me at all, and it's part of the course when you re-release content where the strategies are mostly the same. You can read up on strats months in advance, before the raid actually comes out. In Retail WoW, there's nothing really like that. Sure, you can rely on guilds like Method to clear it quickly and then come out with strategies on how to kill said boss, but that's only available once someone has actually cleared it, and there's no telling if that's the best way to actually kill said boss. Unlike classic raids, where most information has been out for years. So like I said, I'm not surprised at all things get cleared so quickly. Though another thing that contributes to that is the fact that the gear we have is much more powerful. I've said this before in previous videos, but it's one thing to keep in mind when you ask yourself why these raids are getting cleared at such record times. The gear is just a lot better. Remember that Blackwing Lair came out in an early stage of vanilla. And back then, the gear of people was pretty terrible compared to what we have now in Classic, where items are based on the 1.12 stage of vanilla. So people back then, besides the obvious things like internet being much more terrible and such, also had much worse gear. And I wish Blizzard had progressive itemization throughout Classic, because that would further add to the whole experience of going through the patches. Not just in terms of content, but also gear, and it would also mean that these types of raids would be more challenging. Now, I'm not saying they would all of a sudden be much harder, but it definitely would make things a little bit more interesting. But that being said, it does mean that eventually the content is going to catch up to the gear we have. So I think we won't really see a whole lot of guilds struggling until we get to AQ40. And even then, I don't think most guilds will struggle with the first couple of bosses. Apart from maybe Prophet Scarum, because admittedly that fight can be very chaotic at times. I think the real hurdles will be Huhuran and up, where Huhuran is a big nade resistance gear check, and Twin Amps and Cthulhu being pretty tricky bosses in my humble opinion. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, I'd like to share with you guys my own experience raiding Blackwing Lair. So my guild, Original Sin on Earthshaker EU, is kind of a middle of the road guild between casual and hardcore. Yes, we require people to have consumables, but not so much that you have to invest loads and loads of time to farm. I mean, within the guild there's people who still do that, but it's not mandatory. So we, as a semi-hardcore guild, cleared Blackwing Lair in 2 raid nights like I said before, and most of our wipes were due to some technical issues and trying out different tactics. Razorgore the Untamed was a boss we got down on the 3rd try, as we had a few ideas where to position the raid and where to fight the ads. Until we figured out that for us, standing on top of the platform and fighting the mobs on 2 sides works best. Now, Veilstruz was the boss we wiped the most on, mainly due to one of our tanks not appearing on most people's threat list for some reason, so it was hard to know where some DPSer was in terms of threats. We did have the DPS to get him down, it's just that because of that threat issue, the fight was very chaotic. Eventually, I'd say after about 5 tries or so, that boss went down too. So yeah, the fight is just as I remembered in vanilla. A definite gear check and one where over-aggroing might mean an instant wipe for the raid if Veil casts his breath on the DPS and healers. Then we arrive at Bloodlord Lashlayer, which took just 2 tries, with the first being a wipe due to some more threat issues. Though after that was solved, the fight was very doable and we haven't wiped on that boss ever since. Up next are the so-called loot pinatas, and to us they definitely lived up to their name. Firemaw was a little tricky with the positioning and a tank dying here and there, but once we got that down we rolled through that boss too. Ebon Rock was probably the easiest boss of Blackwing Lair for us, as that went down in 1 try and also in record time. I have to say that during our first raid, we also had a lot of deaths during the trash in between Bloodlord Lashlayer and Chromagus, with the Goblin Technicians pretty much one-shotting our melee DPS. So for them the first night of Blackwing Lair was pretty darn expensive in terms of consumables and repair bills. Fortunately for them, we now clear this trash a lot better, with a lot less deaths, so that has been mostly dealt with as well. Now for Flamegore we had to get a little creative, as in our guild we only have 2 people raiding as a hunter, our officer Rawis and me. which is great for loot because we get to gear up pretty quickly, but it also means we have very few people who can tranquilize bosses, and having only 2 hunters for flame gore is not ideal, to say it lightly. So one of our people had to relog, jump on his hunter alt, who thank god was max level and had tranquilizing shot, and with that extra hunter, that boss went down pretty quickly too. And then we get to the big boys, Cremagus and Nefarian. And well, Cremagus for us went down in just one try. I'm not sure how, considering that for almost every other boss we needed at least 1 or 2 attempts to get it down, but everyone seemed to be on their A game for Cremagus, with very little mistakes and an overall great execution of the tactics, which was rewarded with a first try kill. Unfortunately, the crossbow still hasn't dropped yet from this boss, but I'll keep my fingers crossed for the next raid. Then the last boss, Nefarian. So the first phase with the ads is a bit of a cakewalk, with overall good control of the ads and it not being that stressful on the healers. The only real big problems we currently still have with Nefarian is 1. Mages still polymorphing people during the mage call, even though they are miles away and out of line of sight, and 2. The warrior call, where our main tank is stuck in berserker stance and sometimes he dies within 1 second, causing Nefarian to turn and burn the entire raid. Though all things considered, even this boss wasn't too hard for us and only took a few attempts before we got this down too. And on the first try we got the tear and the axe, so in terms of loot we were pretty happy. So all in all, I'm pleased with the way things turned out. I had my expectations going into Blackwing Lair and I knew this raid wouldn't be too hard. All I really cared about was whether it would be chock full of bugs, but fortunately that's not the case, and it seemed like Blizzard did release Blackwing Lair in a solid state. So moving forward, me and my guild will be doing Blackwing Lair weekly, and I'll be praying for that crossbow to drop from Cremagus. Considering how we, a semi-hardcore guild, flew through the content without using a boatload of consumables, I'd say that Blackwing Lair is still pretty doable for the more casual players out there, as long as you know the tactics and you bring a handful of potions and consumables. And there you go folks, that's all for now. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamster Wheel and have a good one.